Thank you so much, Commissioner Reinders, for laying the groundwork for a lot of our discussions today and already putting kind of a focus on the questions about international data transfers. And because of that, it is my absolute pleasure to now welcome Owen Rowland here on the virtual stage with us. Owen is the Deputy Director and Head of Data Protection Policy at the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology in the UK. Owen, thanks for taking the time to talk us through what the UK side of things is made up of, and give us an update on the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill on your side.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to update you on the latest steps we're taking within the UK to evolve our UK data protection regime, very much building upon the GDPR, but trying to sort of look to the future to see, as the use of data changes, particularly how we can develop a framework which is slightly more agile and more bespoke to the different uses of data by different organizations. And hopefully that will be reflected as I go through. Now I'm going to do the key thing, which is to try and share my slides. Sorry, I just have to go share screen and then Chrome tab, and then here we are. Make it a slideshow. Okay, so hopefully you can all see, starting with who I am. My name is Owen Rowland. As you kindly said, I'm Deputy Director for Data Protection Policy in the United Kingdom. And we're delighted to be in the new department you may have heard about, the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. Previously, we had been in the Digital and Culture Department. And as the new Department for Science, Innovation and Technology was established earlier this year, it was absolutely clear that the digital and data agenda would be a critical part of that new department. And so that context in which I'm speaking to you from. And obviously, as the interest in AI, particularly through ChatGPT-4 and generative AI more generally, happened this year, that just illustrated why it's so important that data is increasingly seen as such an important foundational underpinning to so much scientific and technological development, both in relation to AI and more broadly. So it makes great sense. So moving on to the first slide, in relation to our ambition. So as you can see, a key point to underline for us is that the UK is firmly committed to maintaining a high data protection standard and protecting the privacy of individuals, and that will continue to be a national priority. And the Secretary of State herself, Michelle Donnellan, has repeatedly made it clear that she's also focused on retaining EU data adequacy. And I know this is a topic of particular interest to this audience, so I want to make that very clear up front. The bill is also about building upon the high data protection and privacy standards we have in the UK, but making, as I said, some common sense changes to the framework, which reduces burdens on businesses, helps scientists to innovate and improve the lives of people in Britain by enabling responsible data use across so many public and private sectors. And the proposed reforms will mean organizations still need to be accountable for how they process personal data, but there will be more flexibility about how they manage data protection risks within their organizations, more proportionate to the risks involved in the data processing that each individual organization is involved in. So then, just to give you an overview of the bill, for those of you who are less familiar with it, but hopefully won't bore those of you who are, we'll rattle through it quite quickly. So the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill seizes this opportunity to create a new data rights regime, but it's very much an evolution. It reduces burdens on businesses, especially small to medium enterprises not involved in high-risk processing, and researchers. And we estimate it could boost the economy by up to £4.7 billion over 10 years, which gives you a sense of the scale of the potential here if we get it right. And it will enable innovation in science and technology that advance the health and prosperity of society. We're also giving new powers to the Information Commissioner's Office to ensure it can continue to effectively regulate data protection, but in this 21st century context. And as I said, of particular interest to this audience, the bill will also help the UK to strike new data bridges with trusted international partners, boosting trade and market access for UK organisations. So I'm just going back to my right place. So where are we now? So as we introduced the bill into Parliament on the 8th of March of this year, it also had its second reading on the 17th of April, and then went in what's called the Commons Committee stage on the 23rd of May. And it's important to note that the bill not only consists of reforms to UK general data protection legislation and the privacy and electronic communications regulations, but also makes good on the government's commitment to legislate for other policies in similar subject areas. So it also covers off some really interesting elements of how do we put in place the framework to enable participation in smart data schemes led by the Department for Business and Trade, and how do we enable digital identity verification services as well. And then going on to the next slide, going into a little bit more detail on various aspects of the bill, the benefits of the bill to businesses and everyone else. Part one of the bill is the one that makes those fundamental changes to the data protection framework to enable greater data access and sharing in ways that preserve that public trust by creating more certainty for organizations about when and how they can responsibly use personal data. And this includes those core reforms to lawful processing of data and how to deal with data subject access requests. We feel that right now businesses are being forced to follow some of the same rules, even if you're a small organization, as a $1 billion tech company. And we just feel that this one size fits all approach isn't right. So that's why we're cutting the amount of paperwork, making sure that organizations have to comply only with rules on record keeping risk assessment when their processing activities are high risk. We're also getting rid of overly demanding requirements to appoint data protection officers, again, particularly giving small businesses more flexibility about how they manage data protection risks without procuring external resources unless it's of benefit to them and makes sense to them. Businesses will still be able to transfer data across borders with the compliant mechanisms they already use, avoiding needless checks and costs. The bill will also help the UK to strike new data bridges, as I said, and our reforms clarify the UK's framework to regulate that free flow of data between the UK and other countries. And we've also been repeatedly told that uncertainty within the current data protection framework is holding back researchers. We conducted an extensive analysis a couple of years ago, which has directly informed these measures. And as part of that, many scientists said that they were reluctant to get the data they needed to get on with their vital research, as they didn't know how research is defined, for instance, and what their rights were whilst being legally compliant. So we think there's some real opportunity for clarification in that space. At the moment, they feel they can be stopped in their tracks if they try to broaden their research, particularly to follow a new and potentially interesting avenue. When that happens, they can be required to go back and get permission all over again, even though they've already gained it earlier to use personal data. And this is particularly challenging in areas of medical and other research, which rely on data sets from quite a few years back. The bill will simplify the legal requirements around research so that researchers can work to their strengths with legal clarity on what they can and can't do. By providing that legal clarity, we will continue to foster a home for world-class research and development. And we are also encouraging more research activity in the UK by clarifying that research in a commercial setting can be included in the definition of scientific research. Part one of the bill also contains provisions aimed at making improvements to rules on consumer-facing technology. So these include a new duty on telecoms operators to report suspicious nuisance activity on networks and higher fines for nuisance callers and text and email spammers. And the other element I know attendees here today are interested in is on cookie banners. So the bill removes the need to consent for the least intrusive type of cookies, such as those that count the number of visitors to a web page. And we've put in place regulation making powers in the bill to allow us to go further in the future and remove the need for cookie banners altogether. As you will be aware, as the whole environment of consent management evolves, there should be opportunities ultimately to get rid of those cookies, but we also need to make sure that the new consent management provisions strike the right balance between individual control and ease of use. And so that's what we're looking at as well before we use any of those regulation-making powers. Turning to part 2s and 3s of the bill, these take tangible steps to harness the benefits of secure data. Part 2 of the bill will enable secure and trusted digital identity services across the UK economy. So it establishes a framework for secure digital verification services, which means that businesses will be able to create new products with confidence, and people can prove things about themselves more easily, very importantly, if they choose to do so. It's very much putting in place the mechanism for that voluntary approach. And part 3, as I said, led by the Department for Business and Trade, focuses on smart data schemes across the economy. And we think there's lots of untapped potential here, ensuring everyone benefits from lower prices and trusted innovative services. The best example at the moment is open banking, but we think there's great scope in other service sectors as well. Part 4 allows for better sharing of data between public and private entities to improve public service delivery. So this includes reforms led by the Cabinet Office to enable bodies to share information under the data sharing powers in Part 5 of the Digital Economy Act. And it also contains provisions to allow for the registration of births and deaths to be created and held electronically. And then Part 5 of the bill is all about the modernisation of the Information Commissioner's Office. So we're making sure it has the capabilities and powers to tackle organisations who breach data rules, giving it the freedom to better allocate its resources, whilst also ensuring it's even more accountable to Parliament and the public. So going on to next steps. So just to give you an update on where we are on the whole parliamentary process. So the bill will continue parliamentary passage following this public bill committee stage at the Commons, which I talked about. And the details will be set out in due course. Once we've had the King's speech in early November, there will then be a formal announcement as to when the next stage of this and other bills will be. As you know, at the heart of any system that wants to enable data to be used to drive innovation and growth and wider public good for the benefit of consumers, there has to be trust, transparency, accountability. And so this ongoing engagement of a wide range of stakeholders to inform this bill is going to be a vital part of gaining the trust in the future British data protection regime. So as well as sort of engaging in these sorts of events internationally, we're particularly focused on continuing to engage with both civil society and business sectors as we go through the actual passage of the bill in Parliament. So in parallel, we're having quite a lot of engagement with those sectors. Moving on to an area of specific interest to you, EU adequacy. So as I said at the outset, the UK is firmly committed to maintaining high data protection standards now and in the future. Protecting the privacy of individuals will continue to be a national priority, and we will continue to operate a high quality regime that promotes growth and innovation whilst underpinning the trustworthy use of data. And we think that they're complementary objectives. While the bill will remove the more prescriptive elements of GDPR that I mentioned, the UK will maintain its high standards of data protection and continue to have one of the closest regimes to the EU in the world. The UK continues to move forward with our ambitious pro-growth data agenda whilst maintaining those high data protection standards. And we believe these proposed reforms of UK legislation on data protection are compatible with maintaining free flow of personal data with Europe. And we continue to engage closely with the EU and its institutions with a view to ensuring our existing data privacy decisions can remain in place. And as I said, this is a top priority. Sorry for the delay. Just moving on to the next slide, implementation. As I said, as well as ensuring smooth passage of the bill, we're already looking at how do we implement it well to maximize the benefit of the new provisions. So we're already preparing for how we can engage with the various UK businesses and civil society sectors. And this includes engagement and disseminating information as widely as possible. So we're working particularly closely with the Information Commissioner's Office to release guidance at the appropriate time to help stakeholders prepare for these changes. And most importantly, We want to find out how the law is affecting each sector, how they are feeling about it, and how we can help them maximize those benefits. The key aspect of our implementation is continuously engaging with those stakeholders to assess business readiness and support them in preparing for the reforms. So we will produce fact sheets and tables that outline the key changes in the bill and address frequently asked questions as well. And we'll coordinate the material that we produce with the ICO and with other departments involved in the bill to ensure that important information is disseminated at the appropriate time. Moving on to monitoring and evaluation. So one thing we're absolutely determined to do is to make sure that we stick with it. Not only do we really focus on implementation of the bill once it achieves royal assent, but we really want to understand the impact the bill is having. So we're supporting our analysts in preparing a baseline report on the data protection regime, which will be published in spring 2024. And then we're working to identify stakeholders who are most likely to be affected by the bill. And then evaluation will occur after royal assent to assess business readiness and after commencement to inform a post-implementation review. And we're really keen to engage with a range of businesses, privacy and consumer groups to undertake that monitoring and evaluation. So I hope that this has given you a helpful update and overview of the bill. And I'm very happy to take a few questions if there's some time. Thank you very much.
Owen, for this great overview, indeed. And yeah, we have a couple of minutes, so great to follow up on a few things. So you said that you are, of course, still working closely with the EU to ensure that the adequacy holds, basically. Do you see maybe any parts of the new bill that might be problematic, or where you see there's another round of discussion needed to really ensure that the sunset clause doesn't lead to the adequacy agreement falling down?
Yes, so it's the first thing to say is to state the obvious. It's very much up to the EU institutions themselves to describe how they're feeling about the bill. From our perspective, we are confident that we've set out, as I've just outlined today, a way of carefully evolving from GDPR, whilst being able to bring in a bit more flexibility and a bit more efficiency, particularly for those who aren't engaged in high-risk processing. So I think we're quite confident, to be frank, that we've struck the right balance. And as the European Commission itself has made clear, a third country is not required to have exactly the same rules as the EU in order to be considered adequate. If you think of all those other countries, 14 countries of EU adequacy, Japan, New Zealand, Canada amongst them, and they all pursue independent and, to different degrees, divergent approaches, as long as the levels of protection are equivalent. And so we feel that we're well within that pack, and that we're being very careful, and we are continuing to talk regularly with EU institutions, particularly the Commission, to try and gauge how they're feeling about these reforms as they come into place.
That is kind of reassuring to hear, because as you can imagine, a lot of companies really do depend on the data being able to flow freely between the UK and the EU. And thank you for for making the effort and for going the extra mile to ensure the further adequacy holds. But we've seen in your presentation that, of course, your data protection framework kind of is developing away from the GDPR somewhat. You're basically trying a few things I think we would like to try on the continent, but we can't because GDPR, of course, is in place. But there are developments and there are kind of differences now in the frameworks. Could you elaborate a bit what that means for businesses? So will there be different compliance frameworks for one?
Yeah, this is something that obviously has arisen, and quite understandably, right from the beginning of the consultation a few years ago, about when there was a sense that, the UK wants to sort of develop a distinct approach, no matter how close, that could cause costs and uncertainty to business if it means we have to put in place, dual compliance. And so we're very mindful of that. So just to be clear, we've developed the reforms mindful of that. And so organizations that have already put effective policies, procedures, and programs in place to meet the current data regulations based upon GDPR will not have to rip them up and start again to be compliant with the new regime. They will already be compliant with the EU's GDPR and therefore will be pretty much largely compliant with our future regime, except for only a small number of new requirements. And really just about the only one is having a simple and transparent data protection complaints handling process in place. But the bill actually offers a less prescriptive and more flexible approach to compliance, particularly for organizations with processing activities, as I said, that aren't considered high risk. And so overall, we think there's a real opportunity to cut costs for some organizations while still maintaining high standards of data protection. But I do want to reassure that if you're worried about dual compliance, we have developed these reforms mindful of that so that you will not need to sort of rip up and start again in terms of how you do your data processing in the UK. And it will be pretty much the same as what your obligations are within the GDPR context.
That's also reassuring and very good to hear. I'm kind of looking forward to see how it all turns out, how the development on your end will maybe even be able to influence what we're doing on the continent, because as you know, there are discussions going on about the GDPR evaluation, a GDPR review. And I think we will follow very closely what will happen if you kind of develop the law further and how businesses will react, how consumers will react. So it will be a good thing to see. Maybe I would actually like to use the last couple of minutes to touch upon another subject that is included in the bill. So the digital verification, because as you know, we at Bitkom, we also have large working groups that cover all the eIDAS frameworks and of course the digital identity topics. And we've all been asking ourselves how will it be possible to connect the UK framework with the EU one, because as you know, with digital identities, it would be really beneficial if it all works together. So maybe you could elaborate on this also a bit more.
Yes. So I'm very happy to, and I'm very happy if anyone's particularly interested in this agenda to link them up with our colleagues who lead on the development of the UK's approach on digital verification. But to give an overview of the approach, I guess the first thing to say is that by definition, you have to make digital identities work across international borders. It's an ambitious project, but the one that the UK is committed to working with other jurisdictions on. And as a starting point, the UK approach is based upon creating a secure and trusted UK digital identity market that is based on and benchmarked against internationally recognized standards. So that collaborative international approach is totally recognized as being absolutely vital to the approach any individual jurisdiction takes. And then secure and reusable digital identities are a tool, as we know, which can help people engage more easily across the digital economy. And people need to be confident that they'll be in control of how their personal data is used and their privacy will be respected. So that is some of the principle that's at the heart of the UK approach. And the UK government has also promised to create this trust and confidence by setting out the rules for a good digital identity in the UK Digital Identity and Attributes Trust Framework. This trust framework is already available in a beta version, and a live version will be published when the Digital Information Bill is enacted. So absolutely committed to working with others to take an approach based upon international standards and internationally benchmarked. And if if you're interested in the detail of how are we defining what is good digital identity, what are the attributes of that in the UK context, we're very happy to help share more detail as well.
Perfect. Looking forward to continuing that exchange and that discussion. We, of course, will follow very closely what is happening. And yes, it will be great to talk to you again soon at the latest, hopefully at next year's Bitkom Privacy Conference. But thank you very, very much, Owen, for taking the time today. It has been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you.